Good morning, everyone. My name is Lynanne Yundestead, and I'm the Director of New Student and Family Programs here at Virginia Commonwealth University. And I'm very excited to welcome you back to another one of our webinar series events. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Jihad Aziz from University Counseling Services about how to help your student out if they're feeling a little homesick, and maybe what some resources are for you as a parent or family member to be supportive during that process. And I know some of you might be sick for your students and missing them, and so maybe some of these tips will be good for you too. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Aziz. We will have a captioned video that will be posted on our VCU Families page so that you can come back to this and watch it at any time. But for now, I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Aziz.
Thank you, Lynanne. Appreciate it. Again, Jihad Aziz with University Counseling Services. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about homesickness and what your students may be going through. So, when I think about this, parents are, on different spectrums. Some are, ready to get them out of the house and looking forward to it. This, cartoon sort of captures that, let's get them out, let's get them ready. But, it's also an adjustment process. So parents are in different places around, their student leaving. Because I'm sure many of you parents or caregivers can remember, maybe a first sleepover or something of that nature. And then the kid just like, I got to go home. I know we've had that with our children a couple of times. You drop them off, you think everything's going to be fine. And the next thing you know, they're calling because they want to go home, which makes sense for children. So here's sort of when I think about sort of the 5 stages of culture shock, which is, relevant to students. So we got the honeymoon stage, the culture shock, the initial adjustment, mental isolation, which is really sort of confusion. And I'll talk a little bit about that, as well as acceptance and, and integration. We all know like the honeymoon phase is everything exciting. It's wonderful to be at the university. It's all new. And then the culture shock is it's all new. How do I adjust to everything that's going on? How do I make connections? How do I find my way to class? What do I do after that? And then you have that period where there's initial adjustment, where you start to get, comfortable feeling like this is where I know what I need to do. I know what my classes are. I've made some friends. I've made some connections. And the mental isolation or confusion stage is, and parents will find about this, we call it the challenge of change, is, where do I fit in? Because I'm a college student, I have a lot of different freedoms. And then when I go home, how do I adjust to being home? This is the stage where I often tell parents it's important to talk to their children about, what are the rules of your home? Because your student has been independent for a period of time and functioning in a certain way, and now they're coming back to having different rules. And sometimes that can be a challenge for parents as well as for students. And then we finally get to the place where we have the acceptance and integration, where they've made that adjustment, things have been clear, clarified for them, and they're moving on and doing all the things that they need to do as college students. But right around that culture shock stage is where we often find the dreaded homesickness. So part of this homesickness, in general is normal. It's a feeling for longing for one's home during a period of absence. It's really sort of about home is where the heart is, and I have a slide about that as well. But really thinking about, again, homesickness is normal. It's a reactive feeling about being out of your element. Some students will miss home, some students will miss people, so that varies. And how students experience homesickness is very different as well. So it's not all the same. Some will experience it more to a higher degree emotionally than others. So if they're not experiencing homesickness, please don't think that somehow or another they don't miss home or parents didn't do a good job. They just do it differently. And people manage it differently as well. So one of the things about homesickness is really sort of, talking to your student about it. See if they're willing to admit it. If they are, being open to having a discussion about it. But that's where it starts. It's really sort of talking about it. Because home is where the heart is. So that's really important because, and I'll tell you a little bit, so when we say that, we talk about why. One of the things that sort of facilitate, or a few things that facilitate homesickness is, moving is one of the top 10 stresses for everyone. I'm sure as adults you've moved, you know how stressful it can be packing, putting all your stuff together and going to a whole new place and having to figure things out. Their day-to-day schedule or routine is different. They got to figure that out. Even the food is different, because what you make at home, what's in Schaefer Court, what's at Panera, all those are different things that they have to make adjustments to. The people are different. There's people that you grew up with, they know, they feel secure with, they're connected with, and all of a sudden now you have a whole bunch of people or a whole group of people whom you got to re-engage with. Like, how do I develop relationships? And this can be specifically hard for students who are either shy or introverted, who it takes a lot to do that, to build those rapport. So that takes time to be able to do that. And their, sense of normal has just changed significantly. Like I said, their day-to-day routines and the things that they found to be consistent, that they relied on, is now very different. And the thing is, we take our normalcy and the things we do routinely for granted until they're disrupted. And then we realize sort of, hey, this is not okay. What do I do? How do I get that back? And roommates, need I say more? This can be a huge adjustment for many students who are on campus or living somewhere. Even if they know their roommates, it's one thing to have a friend that you spend time with. It's another to live with them. And it's another thing to live with a total stranger and then figure out and negotiate, how do you connect with one another? So, what your students may be missing, because what home provides is love, protection, a sense of security, things that are familiar, as well as routine. So homesickness provides certain behavioral things and support that a new environment doesn't necessarily provide off the bat. Again, there might be people who are there, but people who care about them in the same way, providing a sense of security and knowing that they're safe. Things that are familiar, whether it be their rooms, the people whom they engage with, all those things bring a sense of comfort. And again, having routine is important as well. So here's some tips that you can talk to your student about that I think could really be helpful. Really encouraging relationship building. It's important that students get out and build rapport. I mean, it's a great time to figure out sort of what they're interested in and engage other students. The thing that students often forget when they're going through things like homesickness is that there are a whole bunch of other students who are going through it as well. And they're also looking for connection. One of the great things about coming to the university in the first year is everyone's trying to figure out who they are and connect with one another. So it's a perfect time to figure out what group or who you can engage with that really fits your needs. So it's important that students get out and engage. The other is try something new. I mean, if there's lots of student organizations and opportunities for students to get involved, this is the perfect time to explore something different. Because it's an environment that's really welcoming and supportive. So as you support your student and engaging and doing something different than what they've typically done, it's important to help them to, stretch themselves and encourage to diversify some of their experience so they can just have that, which is important for life and, and growth as an adult in general. Another part, create a routine. This really helps. When people know what to expect, in general, as human beings, if we know what to expect, it brings us a sense of comfort. We at least know what's going on. So I encourage students to get out, to exercise, to use our rec sports. They have a great facility. They have lots of classes that they can be involved in. But whatever it is, whether it be gaming, whether it be, they're studying, going to the library, create a routine, which then also, brings a sense of familiarity as well as comfort that then helps make adjustments. Here's what not to do. Here's the dreaded. One of the things about students being homesick is sometimes they just want to go home on the weekends. That's not a good idea. And the reason for that is there's lots of things that happen on campus during the weekend that people build relationships. So if you're not here for it, it further isolates the student from what's going on in campus and connecting with other students. So it's important that, the student is able to stay here and engage students. Because when nobody has anything to do, they're always trying to figure out who to do it with and where should we go. And there's a lot of activities on campus that they can engage in. So it's important that they not isolate themselves either in their room or by going home, because then they're missing out on a lot of what the university can actually offer them. So here's some helpful tips. Some things that students can do is help them to sort of set goals. Some small goals are things that they might want to accomplish. Again, this helps them to build routine, help them have a sense of accomplishment, Those things help them. The other is encourage them not to wall off from technology, because the great thing about technology, it allows us to connect with lots of people who are even distant, even in other countries. That's a great thing to do. However, if we're spending more time engaging other people on technology elsewhere, we're not really spending time engaging students who are right in front of us. So it's important for the here and now to really sort of engage in connecting with students who are present. So that then helps them to build relationships on campus with other students. Not saying that they shouldn't connect with their friends who are at other universities or back at home, family members. That's all important. But if that's the only connection they have, it makes it hard for them to develop connections here at the university, which then further isolates them and feeling homesick. Encourage them not to compare themselves. We say, compare their insides with others outside, which is, oftentimes when we look at social media, we see people's public success, but we never see their private failures. So oftentimes when they look at social media, wherever they are, people are having a great time. And somehow or another, if they're not having something similar to that in their first experience, then something's wrong, which is not true by any stretch of the imagination. And this is where we have this social comparison thing, which leads to people feeling anxious as well as depressed, because it's a comparison that's not accurate, because we don't have the full picture. So it's important for to talk about your students with social media and really sort of focus on themselves and what's going to help them to be happy. So it's a great time to explore whether their interests and how do they want to engage with other students at the university. So here's some tips for parents, really sort of thinking about, set up some guidelines about how you want to stay in touch. What does that need to look like for you? What's comfortable with you, and being on the same page with your student about it, because some students may want to talk more frequently, some not so much, maybe a little less, so every day at a certain time may or may not work depending for your student. The thing is, your student better than anyone else. So I think it's important to have that conversation about what your expectations are and how you want to engage. When they call, how do you listen and validate their feelings? Sometimes we'll try, and I will talk about this, try to fix it, but sometimes it's just important to be heard, because this is also part of the process. I think the more you know about homesickness and the things that they might struggle with, is the more you're able to then help support them through their challenges. The other piece is really express your confidence in them. I mean, one of the things that you've done as a parent / caregiver is to hopefully, develop the skills to be successful. And they came here because of the work that you've done to get them to this point. So that's a success. How do you continue to support that? So it's not sort of this whole idea of suck it up, you should be able to get through it. It's, I believe in you. What do you need from me to help support you in accomplishing that? I mean, that's the frame that I would encourage that we take when we talk about students who might be struggling. That it's not you do it alone, we do it together, but I believe in you and your ability to be able to do it. The other piece is, don't try to fix it. One of the things you want, you've done a great job of, is trying to raise an independent adult who can make decisions and be critical thinkers. So part of it is I encourage you to help them think through, if something's going on, what could they do? What have they tried to do? Socratic method of asking questions and then providing maybe some suggestions later on, but don't try to fix it for them, and encourage them to be able to do it themselves. And the last piece is, help them get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because that's part of being in a university. It's part of that change around homesickness is, again, their world has been changed. Everything's different, and it's going to cause some discomfort. But you can help them to develop the skills to develop equilibrium, because that's life. Whether it be a new job, whether it be a new class, whether it be new relationships, there will be discomfort. So how do you help them to be able to manage that in a way that's going to help them to be successful in the long term? And that's important just in general to think about. And I want to be honest, here's some signs to watch out for. I mean, if it really looks like your child is struggling and, going through homesickness, and it's physically, if there's really sort of problems with sleep, headaches, fatigue, they're having obsessive thoughts about home, they're really tearful and distraught, and they're not able to get over it. They're having negative thoughts and really not liking where they are. If you feel like they're, they're being more depressed, there's apathy, there's a loss of interest in activities. You know, if they're really feeling lonely, isolated, and you've done a number of things to really sort of help build that, then I think it's important for you to be aware of that. How do we then provide support for your students? You know, so what if you're worried and it's more than just homesickness? If you recognize the signs and it feels like, okay, this is a bit more than what we're comfortable with, you know. So I would say encourage them to talk to someone on campus. It could be faculty, it could be the dean of students, it could be university counseling services, it could be an academic advisors. There's lots of individuals on campus, including Res Life, who can be there to support them, to help them figure out what's going on. You know, but if they need to consult with a professional on campus, like, you know, University Counseling Services is a great place for them to access services as well as student health. Another might be, you know, how do you plan to visit? You know, so maybe them not coming home, but you coming to visit them if at all possible. It's not possible for everyone either to go home or to visit. So it may be, you know, let's schedule some time to Skype or Zoom or whatever it might be. So some way to sort of connect with them around that. But again, you know your student better than anyone else. If it becomes the fact that you're really worried and you're not sure, then I would encourage you to call the Dean of Students Office, call University Counseling Services. We will be happy to consult with you about what next steps might be. You know, again, most students will experience some homesickness and not lead to any feelings of depression or increased anxiety or anything of that nature. But if it happens, and it does happen, you know, please know that there's resources that are available for you at the university so that we can support your student in their success. You know, so here's something to think about, really, just so, you know, as this transition happens. You know, spend some time just reflecting. When you were, you know, between 17 and maybe 22, you know, what do you recall about your relationship with your parents and caregivers? You know, that's important, you know, to really sort of think about what your experience is, because the further away we get from things, we often forget what it's like sometimes for young adults. So I think it's important that we reflect on it. So think about, what did you need from your parent or caregiver during that time in your life? Whether you needed more autonomy, you needed more support, and how did you get that? Did you have a conversation with them? You know, did it not happen and then you wish it did? You know, so you can think about those things and personal experiences, and then how do you use those to then support your student? And it's usually through conversation of asking what their needs are and what you're willing and how to give, and how can you give that. And then think about, how's your relationship changed with your parent and caregiver as you both have aged, you know, because they're going to change. College is going to help them to be more independent adults. And there will be some things that are different, but their fundamental values that you taught them will more than likely remain the same, because that's what you instilled in them. You know, however, how they express that might be different. And it's important to have a conversation about that as well. So for questions, discussion. So people are going to be in different places around this. You know, when your kids move out, they attend college, there's lots of tears and, you know, goodbyes. You know, then when your kids move back after graduation, there might be more tears after receiving them back. But that's all part of the process. The other thing to sort of really think about, you know, is, you know, a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. So part of your student experiencing discomfort is a part of the process of change and growth. So part of it is, how do you help them to get comfortable with the uncomfortable? And I will reiterate again, you know your student better than anyone else. And it's important to listen to them, so you know when they're past their window of tolerance. Because there's a window where you can have discomfort and be fine, and it'd be an opportunity for growth. And then there's a window, then there's a part of when you're past that, where growth doesn't happen and we have significant distress. And if that is the case, then let's get the support we need. Again, most students won't get there, but if they do, that's fine. Just know that VCU is here to support your student in their success, and there's resources on campus, whether it be University Counseling Services, the Dean of Students Office, Residential Life and Housing. We're all there to provide as much support as we can for your student to be successful, and to support you in helping your student as well. So that's all that I have to present today. I don't know if there will be any questions or anything of that nature, but thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation and hopefully not falling asleep. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aziz. So we do have a participant with us. Lisa, do you have any questions that you would like to ask? If so, you can feel free to unmute your microphone and ask those, or you can use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to ask questions. And if not, I do have a couple of questions for you, Jihad.
Sure.
All right, so while we're giving Lisa some time to think about whether or not she has a question, you talked about how it's really important to try something new and to create a routine as a student who might be experiencing homesickness. I know in the past we've had several of our family members call and say, I can't seem to get my student to leave their room, like whether it's they're just gaming all the time or they're just kind of hanging out in there. It's sort of a cave for them, a cave of safety. What do you suggest a parent or a family member say to encourage that student to step outside the door?
Well, I mean, part of the challenge is, because, let's say gaming, for instance, in some ways that could be a way that they get walled off through technology because, usually they're gaming with their friends that they know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to help them, figure out sort of, are there other groups on campus who have the same interest?
Mm-hmm.
Because really it's about what are they interested in? Because if they're isolating themselves and they're doing something, it's something that they have an interest in. So part of it is like, how do they expand that and facilitate that? To really sort of get out and find others who may be interested. Like, there's clubs for gaming. I think the Rec Sports is trying to build like an esports sort of facility so people can do gaming, which I'm sure would excite them to be, in a group or a room full of other people who have very similar interests. So part of it's like, how do you get them excited about that? So it's important to know the resources and what's available on campus, because I think that then interests them and it can motivate them to have more connection with the university as a whole. But I would say to parents, what motivates your student, what helps facilitate that. So I encourage you to do that. But I think knowing what their options are and what their interests and connecting them, those things make a huge difference in getting them out and being involved more.
Thank you. And family members, if you're having a hard time or your student is having a hard time identifying maybe what some of those student organizations or opportunities might be, I really want to encourage you to utilize what we call Rams Connect here at VCU. So if your student just goes to ramsconnect.vcu.edu, that's going to take them to a website where information about all of our student organizations is housed. And they can utilize Rams Connect to search for student engagement opportunities by keywords, things that they're interested in. For example, Jihad mentioned gaming. They could type in gaming and it'll bring up every student organization or event that has something to do with that. And I actually am pulling it up right now on my phone, looking at it nice and easy. And it's telling me that right now there are 177 upcoming events. And when I just scroll through some of these events, I see many of the Weeks of Welcome events that are still happening because our Weeks of Welcome is 6 weeks long. I'm seeing interest meetings about homecoming court, a time management workshop, some opportunities to connect with other pre-health undergraduates. So, I mean, just a lot of different varieties of opportunities. So that if your students are really struggling to kind of connect with people, that might be a really great resource for them to utilize. Also, if they haven't downloaded Ram Guide and opened up the Weeks of Welcome app, that does have the full schedule of all of the events taking place during the Weeks of Welcome, and there are a lot of opportunities happening. All right, that was my big question. Any other questions? Lisa, did you have any questions for Dr. Aziz? All right. Well, I'm very excited. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, we do have, okay. Nope. She says no questions. So there we go. Thank you again so much, Dr. Aziz, for joining us and giving us some tips on how to combat homesickness and some ways to support students who might be experiencing that. One final question I might have for you regarding the other side of this, our parents or family members. What one piece of advice might you give them if they are really missing their student? Kind of the opposite side of the coin. What is kind of the one parting thought you might give them?
Well, I mean, I would say take comfort in knowing that you've worked for this and this is part of your success. Is to realize that you've done a great job to help them get here. So you're missing them, but I think the other side is also being appreciative as well of the success that they've had, and you supported that. And again, set up some time to connect. Never disconnect. Just because they're at your university doesn't mean you don't talk anymore. You know, you just have to figure out what that's going to look like for you, since they're not in your house anymore. My kids don't talk to me in the house anyway, so they text me for everything, even if I'm upstairs. So, you know, so you got to figure out what that's going to look like for you, and then make it work. But again, you know, my appreciation to all of you for getting them here and helping them support them to be successful and to get to this point in their lives. You've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Aziz. All right, I want to encourage you all to join us for our next webinar. It's going to be taking place on Tuesday, September 24th at 11 a.m. And we're going to be talking about academic expectations. So your students are about to go through their first advising experience with their personal academic advisor. And we want to make sure that they understand how to map out their major and what some of the expectations are around that advising experience and how to experience success as a student here. And so many of you had an opportunity to connect with Dr. Maggie Tolan at our orientation program if you attended over one of the last 2 summers. And she talked with many of you about what it means to be a spark champion for your student, to really figure out what it is that nurtures and excites your student, and how to continue supporting them to chase that. And that plays a lot into the relationship that they have with their academic advisor, who's also serving as a spark champion. So Maggie, Dr. Tolan is going to be joining us again to kind of give you a 2.0 on how to be a great spark champion for your student as they're entering that advising process. And so we hope you'll join us again. That's September 24th at 11 a.m. And it does look like there was a question that did come up about whether or not our webinars are archived. They are actually archived. And if you've happened to have missed any of the webinar today or previous ones, you can access them on our VCU Families blog and also from the VCU Families Facebook page. Now, many of you might be part of various parent or family Facebook pages for VCU that are not run by the university. They might have been started by a parent or a family member. I encourage you to keep using those. Those are great groups for you to connect with other parents and family members. But if you want to find out about official opportunities from the university, you're going to want to make sure that you're a member of the VCU Families group on Facebook. And that's where we post a lot of the links to our webinars and events and opportunities. So we look forward to connecting with you again next week. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week this week. Thanks again, Dr. Aziz.
Thank you.